Are you looking at ways to use AI in your business? In this episode, we will break down the key steps you need to take to smoothly integrate AI into your company.
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by Tech Florida man, Rich Swire. How's it going today, man?
Doing awesome, man.
I see you
Doing
lost the
great.
hat. For anyone that actually watches on YouTube, this is going to be quite a day
This is a
for
big
them.
one. Yeah, this is an Easter egg. So, yeah, whoever, the 5 people that are going to watch this episode, if, the first one to say no hat episode,
Yeah.
you win $1.
Oh, there you go. You heard it here
Yep.
first.
You
Now
heard it here
I need a
first.
hat for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just
I might switch it up. I might get different hats, I might throw on something new next time. We'll see.
Yeah, then you're going to have to start doing intros where you go like, howdy, y'all. Here we are on the Wild West of AI and jump right into it. But
That's right. Well, all these influencers have these fancy things that they put on their head. Like there's that one guy, I don't understand why he does it. I don't know if you've seen him on Instagram that has the nose thing.
Oh, just like the breath strip?
Yeah. What
Are you talking about Alex Hormozy, by the way?
Yes, that becomes his look.
That's his thing. I had no idea who
So
you were talking
that-
about until we said that.
My
so.
hat, exactly. I had to describe him through his. So my hat is like my Hormozy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've Hormosified yourself.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know honestly, I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, yeah. It's a solid start because actually today we'll be diving into the current state of AI adoption and bridging the gap between businesses and where they're making that decision on how to start implementing. So for everyone at home playing along with the home game, really there are going to be 7 steps to confidently deploy an AI solution for a company or any kind of business solution. We're going to go through all these a little bit more in depth, but just so we have a little bit of a laundry list to work off of, you want to pick an LLM, you want to pick a framework, you want to pick your first use case, then you need to gather training materials, define the process and goal, set up any integrations that are needed, and then it comes into really the final stages before deployment, which is testing and fine-tuning. So, Rich, I say we take it from the top and, kind of first and foremost, dive into the picking your LLM and then picking your framework, just so people understand maybe some early stages of what they should be focusing on.
Absolutely. So, I think it's important, obviously, to state the obvious, which is, when deploying AI within a business, it's just a completely different dynamic than what we typically would, talk about or at least be exposed to, which is consumer-based AI. So the ChatGPT experience or whatever might end up on the iPhone or on the Google phone, all those other things that we typically as consumers have experienced. For a business to take that experience and take that basic technology and put it within their business, it's just a little bit of a bigger hill to climb. And so These 7 steps kind of outline, I think, at least for most businesses out there, a good framework to start with. So the first step, when we talk about picking an LLM, what we're really talking about is basically picking your operating system for AI for at least the short term, probably the long term future. So it's no different than the decision process of picking what cloud provider you're going to be on. So if you're going to be on the, Google Cloud, the AWS or Azure, all those different options. And so really it's or back in the 80s, it was am I a Microsoft guy or am I an Apple guy, right? So all the cool kids are obviously picking OpenAI because, they are the default leader. They seem to be on a much better path toward innovation and adding, continuing to add more and more features.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like most of the other guys are playing catch up when we're talking about specifically business use case, right? You could argue that others are definitely leading the race, or at least shoulder to shoulder with OpenAI with consumer.
Yeah.
But at least from a business perspective, OpenAI definitely has a pretty far long lead. And one of the things reason why we chose OpenAI as our framework, or as our LLM, is that they have a very open API that makes it easy to integrate with. They have a lot of features and functionality that support application development. And some of the other LLMs really just aren't there yet. Even Google with Gemini is still falling a little bit behind and not as, I think, ready for business applications, but obviously should be considered as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Microsoft, is kind of, toe to toe with OpenAI, very similar. So But
Well, it
yeah,
all
I
starts with
think
us as consumers too, right? We
right.
we were all introduced to this new application really through ChatGPT, so they're going to have a little bit of a better, I think, flag in the ground when it comes to this, just because of the fact that we all kind of flock to what feels comfortable.
Mhm.
And although Google has been integrated in a lot of ways through search with Gemini kind of popping up and now giving additional context, it's different than what we've experienced on Google in years past. So I think the public is still kind of getting
Mhm.
adjusted to that. Whereas a lot of the process with ChatGPT in tandem with OpenAI feels more natural just because it was really our first toe in the water on it.
Right. And I think when you're picking the LM too, you have to consider who's basically there's two things that you have to really consider. Who's going to bring more features and more innovation quicker so that
Hmm.
you can build better applications, and who and cost really.
Yeah.
So OpenAI in the recent model releases with 4.0 and 4.0 mini have obviously shown that they're going to be heavily decreasing cost. And even though people like Facebook have talked about open source,
Yeah.
and I would never say that open source equals free. So that's another conception of what open
Nothing
source
in
is.
life is
So,
free.
but certainly because there's cost to implementing, supporting things like that. So
Yeah, of
at the
course.
end of the day, it's minimal cost for most applications, at least the ones that we're deploying
Yeah.
from an LLM transaction cost. So even though there is a slightly higher fee with OpenAI, they definitely bring more feature rich LLM to the table. So
Yeah, I agree with that.
obviously, if I were to vote, if I was to kind of give advice to a business today, I would always bet on the leader. I think the OpenAI has shown that they're committed to lowering costs, providing more options, different models, and obviously their innovation when it comes to voice
Yeah.
and other enhancements are far ahead of the game. So that's obviously why we chose them.
Hmm.
And if you're going to go the open source route because of for whatever reason you believe that's going to be more of a protective route or potentially more flexible from a cost, let's say you're going to scale to millions and millions of different users, then obviously you'd want to investigate from heavily into the cost. But for most businesses that are doing 5 to 10 AI assistants that help manage and run their business, the cost is so minimal that it's probably better to go with something that's going to be a lot easier to build on
Yeah.
versus because that cost will end up hurting you in the development cycle. So
That's
that's
true.
it. That's the first step. Choose the LLM that you want to use, um, and that takes us to our next step, which is finding a framework.
Yeah.
And the way to define a framework is really something that gives you a head start on how to manage and deploy AI assistants or agents within this LLM. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about with businesses is that you're going to have many, many different use cases to integrate AI into your business. And what we kind of collectively call an AI agent or an AI assistant, both of those are interchangeable for the most part.
Yeah.
What it really means is it's defining a role that you want AI to perform, right? So let's just take the basic use case. The low hanging fruit that everybody sees as obviously an opportunity is the support representative for a company, right? So everybody has the experience of going to a website and popping up a support chat and talking to that support agent to answer the questions, right? So let's say you're going to replace that human with an AI agent or assistant. So you need a framework that essentially allows you to easily build, deploy, and manage that integrates with your LLM, and so that it ties together with your large language model, but also
Hmm.
provides you those key features that you're going to need when deploying that application at scale, but also more importantly, to save you time from having to basically reinvent the wheel, right? Build everything from scratch. And so
Yeah.
there's a few open source frameworks out there that people have leveraged. There's a question on whether they make things easier or more complicated, and whether it's going to actually be a one size fits all. Obviously, we're in the business of providing a platform to help launch, train, and AI assistants with Rhea. But I think if you go out and look at a variety of the different frameworks and platforms that exist, it kind of that decision really kind of leans on you as a business,
Yeah.
whether you have a development team or whether you need something that requires zero code. and it's a little bit more of a more difficult decision to make and a little bit more research required. But that's basically where I think the framework decision is how you go about doing that.
Yeah, one thing on framework there too, like you alluded to, there's a lot of options out there that people can go with, and it depending on how tech savvy you are, or absolute green when it comes to it, it really comes back to almost the core of why you're using AI in the first place. Is like you're trying to allocate your resources to bigger and better things. So is it worth it to go off and take on the project of taking it open source and trying to like mold it into something that might be 80% of what you need, but at least it's good enough? Or finding a partner, or finding somebody out there, or at least a service that has a more polished approach that is going to give you a more streamlined access. I think that's where you go from kind of just the hobbyist or the tech guy that wants to build something cool, just exploring something, to an actual business that says, we need AI. How do we deploy this like yesterday? Most of them are not looking at open source as a viable solution, just because the amount of time they're going to add just crafting something up is taking away from where they're actually trying to be.
Yeah, speed to market is absolutely, you're dead on with that. Speed to market is critical, because you want to be able to deploy something quickly. You don't want to get caught in this death spiral of development cycle where it costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars of development time, and because especially in a new market where there's an innovation cycle the way it is right now, because OpenAI, which is releasing a new model every 6 months, they're releasing features every 3 months. You're going to get caught behind this innovation curve, and you're going to end up building something that's going to be outdated within a year, right? Because they're going to have to throw it away and redo it anyway. So you want to be on a platform that gets you to market quickly. And you also brought up another great point, which I want to emphasize, we've talked about in past episodes, which is the way that you're building AI assistants is much different than building what I would consider classic software applications. So
exactly,
if you were in a company and you're saying, I want to build a software application to help me do X, Y, and Z, what you typically would do is, if you have a development team, you would go to them, scope it out, blueprint, and build it out, and have a budget and knock it out. And hopefully that it comes to fruition, and you test it and you go live, or you outsource it. With AI, what we see is that, like an example for our platform, which requires zero code, you can actually have the business user actually play a bigger role in developing out that AI assistant, training and testing. And you don't really require a lot of heavy lifting from the development team. So that just subtle shift in who actually does a majority of the work, and who can actually control and launch not just one, but multiple AI assistants, is a big deal, because usually the business user is at the, they require the development team and the tech team. That's the critical path.
It's taking resources away from some other initiative. So here it's a little bit more self-sufficient.
And I think another component of AI, and why frameworks are very important to think about horizontally, and not just for like a one-trick pony type AI assistant, is like, I think there's a general trend about nobody wants to buy yet another application, another thing that they have to log into, right? Like now it's weird, but like the trend over the last 10 years has been all these SaaS companies providing one singular function. And now every company has like 10 SaaS products, and none of them talk to each other. And it's not really it's really not smart, because we have all these different products that aren't really working together. And even though they do roles, and they do kind of a good job with those specific roles. So AI gives us that another chance to really look at it from a fully company-wide view. So that's another reason why frameworks are important, so that if you deploy a support AI or a sales AI or an internal HR AI, that they all live on
from one place.
They all live on the same framework. They're all part of the same development cycle. The business users can go in and adjust and train and have and in one singular place, instead of having one AI that sits in your sales SaaS, and one sits in your support software, and one sits in your It's just going to become an even bigger nightmare. And so I think that's another element of the framework that's important, to understand, okay, I'm buying into a framework because I know that I'm going to have 5, 10, 50, maybe even 100 AI agents and assistants that are doing different roles within my business. And I don't want to have them in different platforms and different LLMs on different systems that are all charging me a ridiculous amount of money. I wanted to have it on a solid framework that I have a very solid idea of what the cost and what the go-to-market capability is of that framework. And so those are things you should consider when deciding on number two.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got your LLM now. We have an understanding of a framework or a way that you can manage these assistants in a simpler way. And you talked about it briefly when we were starting to talk about framework and about picking that first use case. One thing that I've noticed happens a lot with customers that we start talking to, or when we're really exploring these, is trying to understand how to identify the best use case that either obviously solves their problem. Ultimately, that's the biggest goal, but offers the quickest and highest return on investment. So, you mentioned support. Obviously, there's some sales bots and things, but I do think that turns back to the business and makes them really look internal to figure out, like, I know I need to fix this problem, but how do I do that? And that's where a more of a consultative approach kind of comes in, says like, well, what's your biggest thing? Is it saving you time or saving you money? Like, which of those is more important at this stage of where your problem is?
Exactly. I think when you're picking out the use case, part of picking out the first one or two use cases is not just about what is maybe the easiest or where you get the biggest ROI from. And it's also to understand that this is something new. This is a road yet traveled. So
Very true.
You also are going to experience what it means to deploy AI. So you're also going to want to understand that's going to answer a lot of questions around risk, around who's really best practices, because we're all building these things, but not every business has it clearly a clear understanding of the path of what it takes and also how to manage that process. And so it's a learning process, I guess, at the end of the day, when you pick your first use case. So you want to make sure that the people that are the decision makers, the stakeholders of that first use case, are invested and want to see it happen.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And they're not threatened by it, or there's not like some unwarranted fear or doubt around what it can do. So you're going to probably start off with something that's facing internal to start, because that's going to give you the least amount of risk and the best ability for you to see what it can actually do. And then number two is like, you want to keep it where it's going to show some sort of calculated ROI, right? Like you're going to get some huge benefit from this long term, but even in the short term, that it's not going to cost you a lot of money, a lot of time to get to a point where you figure out, oh, this isn't really going to help. Nobody's going to use it, or it's not helping us, right?
Yeah. The use case piece is very similar to, like, are you going for a steak dinner, or are you going to like Golden Corral for a buffet? Like, you can get a lot of a bunch of different things, but like, really, if you know what you want, focus your attention there, and then treat everything else after the fact as separate deployments, separate phases, all of that. Because, AI does have this kind of open world feel of, man, it can do so much. But if you're trying to put anything business related in that same mentality, you're never going to actually hit a target. You have to really understand what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And you also, what'll be a challenge is that we've all been kind of programmed to think in this kind of mindset of like many different roles are interfacing into one singular application. And so when we think software development, or we think going out and deploying a solution, we typically start at a very integrated, complicated mindset when we scope a blueprint. Whereas AI, what you really want to do is you want to boil it down to a role, maybe even a task. And so even though it may not necessarily complete the entire process of what your ultimate goal of automation is, it might only do one piece of it. That's good. That's fine. Even if it's just even if it's just taking the first input from a support ticket, summarizing it, scoring it, and putting it and sending it to the support team, that within itself is saving, let's call it 5-minute task, right? It's saving somebody 5 minutes, and you times that by 1,000 a month. Okay, there's real money, there's real ROI there, and that's a solution that's not difficult to deploy. Then when you evolve that use case into something, okay, not only do I want it to summarize and score it, but I actually want it to answer the question and then ask 5 other questions and then send it to so you can expand. It's not like it's not like a one-shot deal. You can build it and train it just like an employee. They start working, when you hire a new support rep, they might only do one specific task until you feel like, okay, I'm comfortable. They're asking and answering the right questions. And then you give them more responsibility over time. And AI is no different.
Yeah. And that kind of gets us into like 4 and 5 from the list, almost going in tandem a little bit, is gathering the training materials and then defining that process and goal. So a lot of
Yeah.
times it does come back to, you wanted to accomplish X, great. How is X being accomplished now? And then
Yeah.
working in reverse from there to build out that dynamic process in the automation. But the training materials too have to be something that, are relevant to the specific role at hand, and not, well, I want this role to have knowledge of all these things. It's like, but does, however the process happens now and the person who handles that, do they need all of that knowledge? Because
Mhm.
if not, then it becomes, almost a hindrance in a way of making sure that you're carving out a clear lane for it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is probably the most critical component, which puts a lot of the onus on the company itself, because has nothing to do with AI per se. It's really more
Yeah.
about what AI requires. And most businesses that we talk to don't necessarily have all their ducks in a row when it comes to gathering training materials and defining their processes. And even just when they hire somebody new and you ask the question, well, how do you train somebody if you were to hire a new support rep? That's going to be no different than training this AI. They would say, "Oh, well, we just have them shadow Jim," or "Oh, we
Yeah.
just have them, we just have them learn on the job, and they just look at old tickets." So, I mean, whatever their approach is, and some companies actually have like, "Oh, here's the full training material," or "Here's the knowledge
Yeah.
base,"
Here's their
or
4-week plan. This is how
right.
we get them ready in 30 days. Like,
So, yeah, so I mean, really, what it comes down to, and this is another reason why it's good to engage with companies that have experience in this space, because this is an area where you really can't wing it. I mean, you can kind of wing it up until now. Like, there's probably a lot of businesses out
sure.
there that are like, "Oh yeah, I'll spin up a GPT and I'll do this and this and this," and then it gets to this point, and this is where everything fails. And it either falls in the bucket of, "Oh, AI is overrated, it doesn't work, this sucks," and they bail, or they basically get to a point where they're frustrated and they don't understand why it's not working, and they don't understand the dynamics of how to train machine learning or LLMs and the nuances that are involved in that. And then
Yeah.
they would come and hire a company like us. So the ultimate goal here is collection of materials that are going to educate and really let this agent answer your frequently asked questions, your basics, ones and zeros. And then over time, you're going to want to have some sort of human feedback where if it answers a question wrong, you're able to go in easily and say, "Hey, that was the wrong answer. And here's
Or
the right
just,
answer."
it was the right answer, but we prefer it to be framed this way.
Right.
Just like if you're
So,
like reviewing call logs for a
mhm.
rep on the phone, right? Like,
So and this goes back to number 2, which is framework. So we didn't talk about this, but it's a good
true.
time to add this to the list of things you should be looking inside of a framework. Is framework should have a way to do internal testing. They should have ways of creating what I would call fake conversations, or
Hmm.
modeled conversations, where you could actually have the AI do what it's meant to do the role and task it's been assigned to, with a fake user, and so that you can see how it would behave before you go live. And also, you'd want to have some sort of human feedback tool set that allows your team to go in and actually look at real time how AI is answering and asking questions, and then adjust its training.
Yeah.
And then also make it easy for you to upload training as well. So these are things that frameworks, the checklist of what a framework should do for you. None of
Yeah.
these things are available as an LLM, right? An LLM is just a database, but the framework allows you to actually do these fine tuning and make these AI agents actually deliver the promise of what they're supposed to.
Yeah. And again, there's so many different systems out there. And the way that we always approach it is with that human user interface, that you can have conversations back and forth and run through these test modules. But that also gets back to, really one of the last bullet points we had outlined, which is when you set up these integrations, having something that from your initial, I think, environment that you had drafted, where it was, now I'm a company that has 10 different SaaS products and they go
Hmm.
all into all these other places. But having all those AI assistants being deployed in different places, the integration piece is almost just as important as the training in a
Yeah.
way, because if it doesn't know where to go and what to do from the process piece, you've just run into, again, just an employee that has no idea how to close the ticket or close
Yeah.
the loop.
Yeah. And it overlaps quite a bit. Like, you're dead on with that point, which is like a lot of times the training materials come from those
Yeah.
uh, other third-party applications. So for example, in the use case of a support bot, it might grab or use tickets that are being created in, let's say, Zendesk or Intercom or whatever, and pull it into your framework and train on that. So
Yep.
you want to make sure integration goes both ways. You're going to want to be able to pull data from these third-party applications, and you're going to want to be able to push back. So once a support ticket, for example, is created and used to train the AI can then talk back to that support system as well when it obviously has a conversation with a customer, puts a summary and scores that conversation, wants to put it back into their profile, for example. So you want to have a full loop. So integrating AI means that your AI framework, it needs the necessary elements to be able to support APIs and webhooks and so forth, so that you can go to your different systems, whether it be a sales CRM or a support system or whatever, or a custom application that you might have built for your company, and be able to make sure that your AI framework can connect with those very easily. So integration is probably it's really where the rubber hits the road when it comes to how businesses need to think about AI. It needs to be integrated within their entire business, but also integrated within whatever ecosystem they've created. So you're not ripping stuff out, you're not replacing stuff, and you're not being disruptive. You're just kind of letting it
working
live
in tandem.
So it's obviously going to be hyper customized because every business is different.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, even if the integration is simple emails back and forth and maybe just a couple documents here and there, you can start off simple. You don't have to integrate with all your systems in order to get any ROI, but it is something to plan toward to make sure that, okay, in 6 months or 6 years, will this AI framework be able to support all my different applications? And so you want to make sure that answer is yes, but it doesn't mean you have to do integration in order to launch your first AI system.
Yeah. No, 100%. And getting the last piece here with like testing and fine tuning, just to go back into like the training process too. I mean, testing and fine tuning is part of training, right? You don't just hire somebody off the street and give them a manual and say, you go on the phone, live in 2 weeks. Like you're going through some quality control, some Q&A with them anyways, just to make sure that they understand like the business from a high level perspective. They understand their role. They understand what the process needs to be. It's the same thing that goes with AI. I do think one thing that we've done recently is just taking ourselves out of the box a little bit was with a specific client having real-time training through one of those integrations as they have stuff coming into their system live, rather than giving a stagnant knowledge base that might be out of date by a couple weeks, couple months, couple years. It doesn't necessarily matter, but having the frequently asked questions coming in now and the new product questions coming in now, it gives businesses a way of saying, okay, I don't have to go in every quarter and like run a quality control against an AI employee and see like, are you still doing a good job? Like they're going to keep improving, but if you can even set it up in a way where we're testing it regularly and it's learning in real time, I mean, that's the like icing on the cake, in my opinion, when it comes to some of these deployments.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's, you have this kind of process of training that happens early, which is like take all your knowledge base, all your FAQs, all your systems, export it, after, curate it, collect it and put it into your AI training. And then ongoing, which is what you basically outlined exactly right, is ongoing. The real-time training is probably the even more important. So you have this, you got to make sure that your framework supports that. You have to make sure that whatever application you deploy supports that, so that anything that AI is talking to, that's why they call it machine learning, right? You want the machine to learn. That's where the power, that's where the exponential return comes from, because customers might ask these hard questions. It might take 2 or 3 people within your organization to answer that question. But then once the AI understands the answer, it no longer takes 2 or 3 people to answer that question when the next time person asks. So you only get the benefit long-term. Because your ultimate goal here, and this is a great way to summarize, the ultimate goal, in my opinion, for any business looking to deploy AI, specifically launch AI agents or assistants, is to build the smartest, basically employee that they have for a specific role, that it can be used for a variety of purposes. The minute you have an AI that understands your products or services and can support any sort of customer interaction, that AI can not only be your best support person, allow you to allocate your resources and grow in your business in other ways. But it can also be the one AI support person that can generate your new knowledge base, that can generate videos, that, who knows what AI is going to allow us to do. And as OpenAI improves their LLMs and their feature sets, as frameworks get better, basically these things that you're training, even if it takes a year or 2 years to really fine tune and train your AI, are going to give you unlimited capability for a return on investment. And they're going to be probably the biggest asset your company has. In fact, I would argue that that's what every company should be thinking. I want to build the smartest possible support / sales / engineer / HR, whatever role that you're looking at. And that is going to be the ultimate asset, because that's going to be able to let you scale and grow your business without having to hire as many bodies or as many people. And it's going to be able to do it much faster at a lower cost.
No, I think you nailed it there. And I believe that if businesses, even in the extremely early stages, look at AI in kind of this step-by-step model, it gives you a much more direct approach on where you need to go. A lot of times with any new feature, tool, or service that you buy out there, you hope that it has a fit, and there might need to be some massaging to get it there. But the process has almost been reversed, where it used to be, hey, we need this, go buy it and we'll figure out how to do it. And with AI, you can kind of go into it backwards and say, if we were to create this process or put this service in place, how do we need to do that? I think it gives the business so much more control and so much less headache on the back end, because you're not just looking at something, again, from even a development standpoint, 6 months later being like, did we just waste 6 months of our time with something that's never going to pan out? Or can we get in and start to brainstorm now and have a process that is, easily duplicated across multiple roles once we know really what the outcome needs to be?
Yeah. And that's another reason why, these 7 steps that we outlined today, I don't know if it became obvious in some of the, discussion points that we covered, but it's so important for you to own your own AI, to own your AI.
Yeah.
You can't let the SaaS providers that you use own your AI. That is I think that's going to be, it feels like you're getting a shortcut. It feels like it's an easier path, but it's something that every business I talk to, I recommend against. I mean, if it's a quick fix kind of thing and you want to play around with it, great, but you have to own your own AI. What that means is that you have to have a framework. You have to be able to build out your agents, and you have to own all of that training data, all of that information that you're going to invest all that time in. Because if you let your AI sit behind Zendesk, not only are you never going to own it and control it, it's going to be limited on what you can train it as. It's going to be a commodity. It's not going to be your own information. And they're going to have you on a license fee per seat forever. And you're not going to really get the benefits you need. You need to have all that live within your stack. And, so I think there's this kind of, the next year, we're going to see a lot of people take that route of, oh, I'll just buy the AI that every single one of my SaaS providers provides. But the reality is they'll figure out quickly is that it's not malleable, it's not going to scale, it's not going to work for their organization, and they're going to ultimately come back to owning and wanting to have a general platform to deploy, which is the right way of going about it. So, that's kind of like the goal of today's episode, was to outline, to show that it's not a very scary path, that the investment required is minimal from a time and money, and ultimately you're gonna end up being happier,
in full control,
and in full control, and not fall for this. Oh, I'll buy from this company, this company, this company, this company, and maybe it will work. You might get a tad bit of ROI, but long term, you're not going to have ownership, and you're not going to see the what I would consider the real promise of what AI is going to bring for a business.
Rich, do you need a hand down from your soapbox, or can you get down
I got
yourself?
I think I can get it down.
All right, perfect. I just want to make sure. Well,
I'm just trying to save people time and heartache. I'm a giver.
That's what it is. Yeah, and next episode, I think there's a couple topics too that have come up while we've been talking about this. I think we should expand on a little bit from balancing innovation and expectation, and maybe some of these things. So we'll kind of table that till next time. But in the meantime, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue the discussion. That was almost a complete fumble there, but I nailed it. So we appreciate you listening to us be seriously stupid, and hopefully we came off surprisingly smart as well. Take care, everyone.
See you, buddy.
Takes the flow, Leah Rich on the mic, ready to explore.